So thank you a lot. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here with you with so many important activists that are working a long time on this issue. My name is Hevelyn Ghizzi. I am Brazilian and currently engaged in the Romania for Peace chapter. So Florina talked to me about the idea of presenting a little about the organization I am part of, as well as the course we are running here in Brazil. So if possible too, I would like to comment on the participation of young people in promoting peace and some insights about the G20 that happened now in November. 10 days ago. So I realized that these are really different topics and deep topics. So I will try to cover a little of each, but we can discuss after more. So firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. I am 25 years old, graduated in International Relations and Integration. I am home-based in the south of Brazil, Foz do Iguaçu, it's called my city. And currently, I am the operations coordinator of Dhesarme. But I am also part of Minds Action Fellows from Minds Action Canada and Stop Killer Robots Youth Network and other Brazilian organizations correlated to gender and security. So, moving on, passing here. My organization is called Dhesarme, that is the Brazilian Action for Humanitarian Disarmament, and our aim is promote and advance the humanitarian disarmament agenda in Brazil and other areas. So currently we work on 5 themes. So there are landmines, cluster munition, nuclear weapons, autonomous weapon systems, and international arms trade. But these years, we had a bigger focus on the advocacy on cluster munition, since Brazil is not part of the international treaty and it still produces, stores, and exports this type of weaponry. So on all these issues that we work on and we search on, we have the support of and work directly with larger organizations such as the ICBL, Stop Killer Robots, Minds Action Canada, ICANN, and among others. Well, between June and August this year, in partnership with the ICBL and Stop Killer Robots, we held an Introduction to Humanitarian Disarmament Course, which was divided into 5 modules covering all the top topics we study and research, as well as special guests from different national and international organizations. So the course was mainly aimed at international relations students, but we had the active participation of more than 40 students in each module from different nationalities. So that was really great. We also made the content of the modules available in Portuguese and Spanish, and some of them in English too. We had some certificate of participation, liaising with different civil society actors, a post-course satisfaction form, and finally we had 12 new volunteers for our project Dhesarme. So this initiative was completely free of charge for the students and brought the issue to the table for debate. So that was really great in the subjects in the university. So related or talking about pacifism and activism in Brazil, we have a long and complex history. Internationally, Brazil exports a foreign policy of diplomacy, mediation, negotiation, and it deserves credit for it. But when we look at the national level, the rates of violence are extremely high. The social struggles and movements tend to strengthen or even weaken depending on the government in power. So the discussions about disarmament are really controversial, as many believe that weapons are necessary for national security. So as we can see in the companies that continues manufacturing and exporting cluster munition, even if we know that this kind of weapon, it's considered like in the past. So it is really hard to discuss it in national level. But related to Latin America as a whole, the countries has not been involved in major international wars and media wars, but it suffers from high levels of violence, mainly influenced by corruption and transnational organized crime. There is one topic of my studies too. So despite the common history, each Latin American country suffers from different threats and at different levels. It is really hard to discuss it in general when we talk about Brazil. Brazil is a really big country, but we have so many neighborhoods, so it is hard to discuss in general of them. But speaking of activism, it exists here in Latin America. Exists many organizations and they are fighting for a less violent space, but there is still a lack of joint integration between organizations. So this is what Dhesarme is proposing and has been trying to do since last year, try to strengthen the national and international network to try to fight it together for a more peaceful world. So here at the slides, you can see some pictures of us. All here are members of Dhesarme. So we had published some chapters and articles in different books, mainly in Portuguese, unfortunately, but we have some productions in English too. And we are going to different organizations to discuss about humanitarian disarmament and how can we have like a really more effective answer from the countries and the governments. So in relation to current conflicts, and please tell me if I'm going too fast, okay? Because that's really my kind of way, so I always talk really fast. Please let me know. But in relation to current conflicts, Brazil has adopted, and that's like always adopted this position of active neutrality and multilateral diplomacy in relation to the main international conflicts, always seeking to act in favor of dialogue, peace, and the peaceful resolution of disputes, as well as maintaining its sovereignty and national interests. And talking about the G20, both in the resolution and in the discussions, the focus was on the three pillars that you can see here that are in green. But they comment a little bit on current conflicts. And I have added here what they said in the resolution. It is the point number 8 and 9. And in this QR code, you can find the G20 Rio de Janeiro declaration. So that all the more than 80 countries already signed it. So it is interesting. But in the face of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and when we talk about Brazil, Brazil has maintained a stance of active neutrality, seeking not to align itself with either side. The country opposes the escalation of violence and the use of military forces, arguing that diplomacy should be the way to resolve the crisis. But it does not agree totally with the US position and also does not agree with the Russia actions. But at the same time, Brazil is part of the BRICS. So in the economy level, it's a bit difficult to talk about this type of conflict. So it is content to choose sides. So Brazil really have this neutrality path. So the Brazilian government even advocates that a multilateral solution and also calls for the involvement of international organizations such as the UN to mediate peace. And even our President Lula has on a number of occasions suggested that we need like a G20 of peace. In other words, he says that we need a group of countries with a more balanced position to try to broker an end to these hostilities. So when we talk about on the Gaza Strip, Brazil expressed solidarity with Palestine and defense of human rights. Brazil has also condemned violence on both sides, but has more strongly criticized Israeli settlement policies and the blockade of Gaza. So it is a point, but basically in the G20 declaration, it is reinforced that the peaceful resolution of conflict and efforts to address crises, as well as diplomacy and dialogue, are critical. So we need to go in this way of peaceful resolution. But when we talk about Brazil and see like the future of it, I can say that Brazil probably it continues to have like this neutrality position. And then I would like to move on because I know that my time is running on. So on youth participation. So on youth participation, I would like to start and highlight that we always say that the children are the future of the world, and I totally agree with this sentence. But today's young people are the tomorrow's policymakers. So the near future is built by these young people. So it is important to recognize that in order for young people to feel motivated and engaged, it's necessary to adopt strategies that speak directly to their interests, needs, and forms of communication. And when I say they, I include myself. So holding, for example, free workshops and debates on current issues, offering volunteering opportunities, and even pay for training these young activists using social networks with interactive and education content. And I believe above all this, actively listening to what young people have to say are all ways of bringing them closer together and getting them more interested in fighting for a more peaceful world. What I notice most are that young people who want to make a difference, but who can't find a place to work or even recognition because of their age, get even more like away of these currently topics. So at the same time, I see that those young people who have managed to get an internship or a trip or a training are making the world a better place. And I see that and I tell that because I have so many friends around the world that are really working on. So I believe the opportunities is the main point here. But young people generally have a lot of energy and they are creative and can contribute a lot to decision making. Today's problems, as the Secretary General says of UN, today's problems won't be solved with solutions from the past. So we need to think away, we need to think in the future with the solution or thinking about today. So we need to show that the young people, we young people are important and we can make a difference. So here are also some pictures of Dhesarme volunteers. So we are doing some action campaigns from Stop Killer Robots, from also with another organizations from Paraguay. And these are just some insights, some questions raised for us to discuss. I am opening the floor to answering questions and also to discuss a little more because I know that you have like a really big background on the area. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for listening to me and giving me this space. So if you like, you could follow us on Instagram too. So thank you a lot.